Today's World Insight, the big mission of inclusive growth in a time of pandemic. In the words of Chilean President Sebastian Pinera.
Growth has to be inclusive and sustainable. Otherwise, there will be no growth.
And the tall order of businesses surviving and thriving in a pandemic-induced global economic crunch. An APEC business leader, the PricewaterhouseCoopers global chairman, shares his company's experience and insight. Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. Malaysia is hosting the 2020 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Informal Leadership Meeting with APEC CEO Dialogues. Chinese President Xi Jinping keynoted the dialogues via video link on Thursday, calling the Asia-Pacific a shared home and expressing his hopes for the Asia-Pacific business community. At the APEC meeting this year, member economies aim to work together on inclusive and sustainable growth. Despite the pandemic's devastating effects, Pacific Rim countries such as Chile seek to keep APEC's significance as one of the key multilateral blocs in the world. So listening in on my conversation with Sebastian Pinera, the Chilean president, for his insights on inclusive growth. Welcome to the session on the challenge of inclusive growth. My name is Tian Wei, moderator and host of World Insight with CGTN, here based in Beijing. It's such an honor to host a session with Mr. President coming from the Republic of Chile, His Excellency, Mr. Sebastian Pinera. Mr. President, what a pleasure.
Wei, good morning, good night, good evening, whatever. Here we are in the springtime and taking advantage of a beautiful morning, and we are ready to talk about the future.
The future and the inclusive growth, as that is the key word in our topic today. How do you see the issue of inclusive growth at the time we were facing the huge challenge of COVID-19, Mr. President?
Well, first of all, I think that growth has to be inclusive and sustainable. Otherwise, there will be no growth. And we better understand that. The sooner the better. Now, of course, we are facing huge challenges, like the pandemic of the coronavirus, the international economic recession. But even in the middle of these hard times, we should never forget that growth has to be inclusive and sustainable. First of all, I remember when in 1994, when the APEC was created in Indonesia, we set the core values of APEC. And among those core values were, first of all, equal partnership, shared responsibility, mutual respect, common interest, and common benefit. And to achieve those goals, growth will have to be much more inclusive and much more sustainable than what we have done up to now.
Mr. President, it's wonderful that you are reminding us of those important goals. Having said that, though, how to implement those goals into real actions? How do you see the challenges and the opportunities that are existing in your country right now?
Well, Chile has had a very good period in the last 30 years. When we recovered our democracy in 1990, up to now, we have experienced a good process because we recovered our democracy in a peaceful way. We were able to multiply by 5 our per capita income. We were able to become the country with the highest per capita income and the highest human development index, to reduce poverty, to increase equality of opportunities, but none of that is enough. That's why we are now trying to introduce the concept of inclusiveness and sustainability in all our public policies. And we are facing big challenges and big threats like everywhere else in the world. Of course, we are facing this pandemic. Fortunately, we have had 5 months of improvement in terms of less people getting contagious, less people losing their lives. And that's something that we have to keep because we know that the second wave is always a threat. And at the same time, we're trying to recover our economy and recover our capacity to create jobs. Those are the main targets and the main goals that we are pursuing. in the Chilean situation.
At this moment, you're trying to keep a balance between economic recovery and also prevention and control of the pandemic. Now, that's really a very delicate balance. We have seen economies closing down, opening up from time to time over the past few months. How do you look at that balance, Mr. President?
If we only concentrate on fighting the pandemic and we forget about how to recover the economy, people will suffer from other evils like unemployment, poverty, hunger. And if we only concentrate our effort in the economic recovery, people will suffer from the pandemic. So we have to have those two things in our mind and work with both of them simultaneously. That's why we have set up two plans in Chile. One is called Step by Step We Protect Ourselves, which is a deconfinement plan to give more flexibility, more freedom to people, but keeping the precautions in terms of washing your hands, using a mask, keeping your social distance. And the other plan is Step by Step We Recover Our Economy. Right now we have 5 months of improvement in the fight against the pandemic and 4 months of recovery of our economy and our capacity to create jobs. So we are moving in the right direction. It doesn't mean that we don't have problems. We are still facing huge problems, but we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
The other thing you mentioned in your earlier remarks is about the social inequality. You said the UN administration is trying to handle. Now, that has been a concern for some years, Mr. President. How to address those difficult issues that has been in the making throughout history and be able to address it in an efficient way under the current circumstances when the economy are suffering? That's really, I guess, a huge question for you every day. Tell me more about your latest plan.
It's true that we have been working during the last 30 years, many governments, to reduce inequalities in Chile and to increase equality of opportunity. But we have achieved great results, but not enough. We still have too high levels of inequality, and we are not close enough to have a real equality of opportunity. How are we dealing with this? I think that there are 3 major tools. The first one is to strengthen the families. When you have strong families, you have better education, you have less delinquency, you have more opportunities. The second, to create jobs, because to create jobs and allow everybody that wants to work to have a good job with a fair salary is a key aspect. The third area where we're working very hard is to improve the quality of education, particularly early education, because that's where you can really reduce inequalities of origins and to move forward towards more equalities of opportunity.
These are aspirational goals, certainly, Mr. President. On the other hand, how do you see, the being of the region, Asia Pacific particularly, as we are in the session, has been an environment for your economy and also for your economy to create jobs for your young people?
Well, it's true that, as we were mentioning at the beginning, that growth and development has to be inclusive. It means it has to be for everybody. If we left some people behind, it doesn't work. And at the same time, it has to be sustainable. So we have to take care of nature and the environment. Chile has a very ambitious plan. For instance, Chile has committed itself to become a carbon neutral country, 0 net emissions before 2050. And for that, we are doing many things. First of all, we are decarbonizing our energy matrix, substituting coal and oil for solar energy, wind energy, and we are doing that at a very fast pace. Actually, more than 95% of the investment in energy right now in Chile is with renewable, clean energies. The second thing is that we are doing is transform our transportation system from a system based on fossil fuels to a system based on electricity. And in the future, I think they will be based on green hydrogen. We are very, very committed, because since we have solar energy, we can produce green hydrogen, which means it's a source of energy which is absolutely clean and renewable. So we are working very much in trying to not only to produce green hydrogen for our country, but to be a main exporter to the international community. And the last thing, we're taking good care of our forest and reforesting a good part of our country. With those three things, we are moving very rapidly, according to our pace, to become a carbon neutral country.
Mr. President, over the past few days, I've been talking to business leaders and also some political leaders to prepare for today's discussion. Some of them have also been talking and also articulate things in the way you just did. And some also pointed out there is an opportunity now. It seems to be opening there for major powers to cooperate and also for the improvement of international governance. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that we have to rethink the whole international architecture, which was built after the Second World War for a different world. So one thing is to strengthen the United Nations, to strengthen the World Trade Organization, which is not playing its role, to strengthen the World Health Organization. Those are some areas or some path that we will have to follow. But for that, we need to have a better relationship between the U.S. and China. Those are the two superpowers of modern times, and without their commitment and collaboration, it will be very difficult to move forward. It's not enough to have China and the U.S. The whole world has to collaborate. But I think that we realize that to face threats, huge threats, like global warming and climate change, we don't have the kind of tools and the kind of institution to face the pandemic, the coronavirus, and the pandemic that will come in the future. This is not the last one. It has been the worst one, but it's not the last one. And so we have to realize that we need to move forward and strengthen the international governance.
Earlier, the representative of the organizing committee in Malaysia has been talking about collaboration, cooperation. Also been hearing from some of the leaders before our talk today has been also delivering their speeches touching on keywords such as cooperation. That includes, if I remember right, the Chinese President Xi Jinping. So tell me, Mr. President, from your perspective, how do you think cooperation can be done? What will be the first things that economies from the Asia-Pacific region can cooperate on, and the launching pad for that cooperation to take place after being delayed for several years?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate Malaysia because they have done a great job in organizing this 2020 APEC meeting. It's a very peculiar meeting because of the pandemic. It has been through the technological tools. But they have done a great job, and I want to appreciate that and congratulate them for that. The second thing is, as we were mentioning before, that we have to, first of all, the main goal of APEC is to create a free trade zone in the Asia-Pacific area. That's the main goal, and we are not yet there. That was established in Bogor, and we are not moving fast enough. So the first thing is that we have to keep and strengthen our commitment to create a free trade zone in the Asia-Pacific area. There have been some improvements. For instance, the RCEP, this free trade area that has just been agreed in the Asia area. What we're doing in South America with the Pacific Alliance. Those are steps towards that direction. But the main goal is to have one single free trade zone, including all the countries that are members of the APEC. That's something that we have to do. The second thing that we have to realize that we have to introduce more equality, more inclusiveness. And in that, we have to take a special care and have a special commitment with how to give to our women the same rights, opportunities than men. And that's something that we can do much better than what we have done up to now, in terms of equal salary for equal jobs, access to the job market, access to leadership positions, access to key educational areas. Those are things that we have to move faster. The second thing, how to incorporate to this integration effort to all the small, medium-sized enterprises, because we want this APEC free trade zone to work for everybody and to be beneficiary for everybody. And the last thing is, I think that those are the targets, but we have a magnificent ally. We have problems, the global warming, the coronavirus pandemic, but we have a huge ally, which is the tremendous technological and digital revolution that we are experiencing. So we have the problems here, we have the tools here, we have to use the tools to solve the problems. That's the main, I think, the main challenge that APEC is facing today.
Digitalization certainly is a great tool to advance some of the important causes you mentioned, Mr. President. But at the same time, we also see divide and gaps of infrastructure for digitalization, for example, in different parts of the world. How do you, as President of Chile, see that issue? And how do you think you and other political leaders could work together to make it improve?
Well, it's true that digitalization is a magnificent opportunity, tool, instrument, but it has also some dangers because it could increase inequality instead of continuing to decrease inequality. That's why it's so important that digitalization has to achieve and reach each and every corner of our country, each and every family. That's why in Chile we are working very hard, not only in introducing new technology. We are about to introduce the 5G technology, which will change the game because it's so much more powerful and faster and more reliable. But we have to also to make sure that everybody will have access to these new technologies, because otherwise we will have a divided society, those that have access to the digital revolution and those who don't. And we don't want that. That's why we are creating a network so to guarantee that every single home and every single school and every single person in Chile will have access to these technologies. And the other things that we want to connect, that's why we are working very hard to have a submarine cable that will connect South America with Asia. And therefore, we don't have to rely or to go through the US or Europe in order to reach a direct connection with Asia.
Many of us are extremely curious about what happened last year and whether we will be able to travel to Chile in the future, because last time we missed the APEC meeting. So can you tell us about the latest development?
Well, as I was telling you before, in the last 30 years, Chile has made great progress in terms of recovering and strengthening our democracy, in terms of economic development, in terms of reducing poverty, in terms of increasing opportunity, increasing our life expectancy. But it doesn't mean that we don't have troubles. We had some problems, particularly that we still have excess inequality, and we need to have a more inclusive society. And that was, you know, that we were organizing the 2019 APEC meeting and the 2019 COP meeting, and we have to postpone both of them because we have some social unrest and many problems in Chile that we are facing. How have we facing that? First of all, speeding up and strengthen the social network to reduce inequality and to move faster towards greater equality of opportunities. And we are working on that with a very strong commitment. The second thing is that we also are working in finding a path in order to reach an agreement with respect to our Constitution, which was one of the main issues that were discussed last year. Now we have an agreement. We had a constitutional reform, which was plebiscite on October the 25th. It was approved, the path, by a huge majority of Chileans, almost 80%, and we are following with that path to reach a new agreement with respect to our social pact, to respect to our Constitution. So that we are doing that within the democratic system, within the rule of law. And the third aspect is that we have to, of course, to be able to control the pandemic of the coronavirus, and at the same time to recover all the jobs that we've lost. We've lost, at the worst part of the cycle, almost 2 million jobs. We have already recovered 700,000, but we need to keep moving in that direction and reactivating our economy.
There are a lot of business leaders from around the world that are listening to our conversation right now. What kind of environment do you and your administration will be able to create so that investors and business leaders would feel confident about doing business and doing investment in your country? Briefly.
Chile is a country based on democracy and the rule of law. So you can count that in Chile the rule of law is respected, and we have a democratic, open, and a society which is integrated to the whole world. We have free trade agreement with almost every country in the world: China, Japan, the US, Europe, you name it. So those are two basic things: the democratic society, and we respect and we are fully committed with the rule of law. At the same time, we are committed with an integration to the world. That's why we have all these free trade agreements, and we have also this political and cultural agreement to collaborate. And in Chile, we have great opportunities for investment. We have also the new renewable clean energies: solar energy, wind energy, green hydrogens are very powerful, and we have a huge perspective and opportunities. So let me tell you that all those investors are welcome to Chile.
Mr. President, my last question. We have seen the world has been changing so fast. There are also temporary challenges that we all have to face. Now, what do you consider as the most important qualities of political leadership these days? What is the best way to handle crisis and facing up to the ever-evolving challenges that all of us have to look at and confront every day?
I think it's a paradox, because we have never had so much and powerful tools, technology, science, to keep going. But at the same time, we have never had, I think, in the history of mankind, so many challenges and threats, like global warming, like this pandemic of the coronavirus, the aging of our population. And therefore, I think that the leaders have to have very clear that we are facing huge challenges, and we need to act in an honest way. We need to collaborate. We need to collaborate, because these problems will have to be faced with collaboration. And I think that trust and the knowledge and comprehension of the huge challenges that we are facing, and the will to act, for instance, in terms of climate change, science has spoken loud and clear. We are in a very risky path towards catastrophe. We need to change the course of history. The time for diagnosis is over. Now is the time for action, because we don't have time. We are running out of time. And I think that in that area, we are not receiving the message. The people, particularly the young people, have asked us, have urged us as a moral challenge to move faster and tackle this problem with more will. We don't have time to waste or to spend with respect to the global warming challenge or with respect to coronavirus challenge.
Well said, Mr. President. Clear mind, efficient actions, honesty, and certainly collaboration. Thank you so much for sharing those keywords with us. You're watching World Insight. Coming up in our program today, the tall order of businesses surviving and thriving in a pandemic-induced global economic crunch. An APEC business leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers global chairman, shares his company's experience and his insights by talking to leaders around the world after this. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Today we're focusing on the just wrap-up APEC CEO Summit. This year's APEC CEO Dialogues, held virtually, brings together government and business leaders from 21 APEC member economies. The top agenda: work together to spur post-pandemic growth. On that, do listen to my conversation with the global chairman of PricewaterhouseCoopers, Robert Moritz, for his insights on the global business environment. Mr. Moritz, good to see you.
It's great to see you, Tian, as well, and good morning to those that are in the audience and watching around the world to this important conference. I just apologize I can't be with you in person.
Thank you for joining us. My first question, I see you personally and also your teams around the world have been very proactive over the past 11 months in order to deal with the crisis we have in this world. When you are talking to business leaders around the world, what are they saying about the state of the global economy, sir?
Well, it's clear as we talk to executives, government officials, and community leaders that there's a challenge in the economy. If you go back a year ago, we were starting already to see some of the slowdown from an economic growth perspective. COVID-19 and the pandemic has only accelerated that slowdown and put it on steroids in terms of the impact it's had around the world. Clearly, we're looking and anticipating vaccines that'll help, but it's uncertain in terms of the impact of when, in fact, that'll come into effect and scale sufficiently enough to right-size the economy as it looks today. At PwC, we're projecting a slowdown in the economy in 2020 by about almost 4.5%, 5%, but we do see the opportunity for a rebound in 21. This is all dependent on how things progress over the next few months. But what's important is when we talk to our clients, the CEOs, their management teams, their boards, their supervisory boards, the ones that are most successful and most positive are using a framework. They're repairing the damage that's been done, maybe excess debt that's been brought on their balance sheet, or a loss of a supply chain, or loss of a connection with a consumer. They are rethinking their purpose and their business models. They are reconfiguring their assets. They're restarting with a sense of urgency and energy, with speed and agility and adaptability. And they are reporting. They're reporting to demonstrate the progress they're making against stakeholder needs, not just shareholder needs, to demonstrate what they're doing to be more inclusive with that growth.
You talk about the inclusive growth for the business community. Obviously, that's also the topic for this year's APEC CEO conference. But you know, how to be inclusive at this time when most of the companies are under financial strains? This is a question I'm sure business leaders around the world are asking them every day.
Yes, well, first, as we think about this issue, we need to have leadership teams step up and respectfully challenge the norms that we've demonstrated over the last few decades and learn from the challenges of the past. I will argue that even the lessons from 10 years ago during the last financial crisis were not fully absorbed and therefore after were applied. But step back, if you can, Tian, to the challenges. We see megatrends, demographics, shifting capital markets, the concepts of urbanization, the implications of scarcity of resources, and the impact of technology. It's clear that there's bigger gaps and asymmetry. The amount of wealth that's concentrated in a fewer number of people and the amount that are still in poverty. Clearly, capitalism, as we've defined it, has served society well over the past few decades, but with more transparency and more trends and asymmetry, we see more people being left behind. The system is not serving them well. As a result, we have to think about this system, because due to that system not serving them well, there's a loss of trust. As a result, there's a rise in nationalism and populism. There's a disenfranchise with the system, their governments, the business community, or their leaders. So as a result, you've got to engage more to understand the world needs and articulate your purpose. You've got to understand what it means to actually think about the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals that the UN put out and others are focused on. And you need to, equally importantly, focus your strategy to be not just focused on shareholders, but stakeholders. These stakeholders now have a much bigger voice. We talk about investor activism. Yeah. I will argue that consumer activism becoming bigger and more important. Employee activism is becoming bigger and more important. And they are having a sway on the long-term sustainability of businesses, and they should have and will have an implication on government as well as we look ahead. So we need to be mindful, we need to be accountable, and we need to take actions to serve well the broader stakeholders in society that we all have to interact with as a responsibility of business.
Tell me more, Mr. Moritz, about your thoughts about the cooperation of trade within Asia Pacific region. How can we create bigger pies for everybody?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to point to some of the research that we just did, and we released a report in conjunction with the APEC meetings around the future of Asia Pacific. In that report, we focus on 5 very specific things that governments and business can hopefully work on together. The first one is advancing and leveraging that digital economy, that opportunity, and the well-positioning of the region in terms of how you were successfully able to do that and serve and change the small to medium-sized enterprises, as well as take advantage of the opportunities that came from that with the internet connections and the well-skilled workforce that you have today. The second is, how do you ensure more regional growth? This is where the trade issues come in. We have 2 elements there. There's a great opportunity as you look at trade across the region, and the opportunities because the demographics are so well foundational in terms of the opportunities as you look at the number of people in that region, the number of people that are rising from the middle class, and the needs that they will have. Trade will become important because no one country can serve all their citizens. The second part of the trade issue is how do you continue to advance in the trade with these other countries outside of the region, be it in the EU, in Africa, particularly the US and otherwise. And that's another opportunity which we know has been a challenge over the last couple of years because of this concept of nationalism and protectionism. But you do see the needs. Let's just take one very small example, if I can, Tien. Each year we ask our CEOs that we survey, what are the number 1, 2, and 3 areas for investment if outside of your home country? While we've seen the trade wars, arguably, between US and China, the number 1 or number 2 countries everybody wants to invest in is the US and China. It's the same answer for those businesses from US and from China. So while our politicians and the media make this a big challenge, and it is, I want to recognize that there's still a fundamental dependency on one another. And we have to build on the positives that exist and continue to think about the end game here, which is how do we advance the opportunities for our people in terms of how they live and work and the economic opportunities that come from that, both for those individuals as then the country itself.
Excellent points, Bob, over there. Let me just follow up on some of the things you just said. You talk about the importance of a trade within the region and beyond. We noticed that not long before this year's APEC summit and certainly APEC CEO dialogue, RCEP has been signed by 10 economies in the ASEAN countries and the economies, and also by China, South Korea, Japan, together with Australia, New Zealand. Many suggest this is one of the largest trade gesture from the international community for multilateralism. What is your take about the opportunities this could create for our region, our Asia-Pacific region? And what does it mean for some of the points you already said about engaging the stakeholders?
Yeah, to me, it's great opportunity. I think it's actually a very positive step forward in terms of the arrangements to ease the facilitation of trade across the region. Obviously, as one of the key indicators of people willing to invest is how do we make it easier to do business with those countries and across those countries? And this trade agreement actually helps start to take down more and more of the barriers to move with speed and urgency to enhance that trade. If, in fact, you're able to deliver the goods and services more effectively and efficiently, if you're able to deliver good quality services in a carbon-free way with new different skills, I think those opportunities continue to outpace perhaps the rest of the world when you look at the underlying demographic shifts and the needs of the rest of the world that will depend on this particular region going forward. That will pay dividends in terms of future employment. That'll pay dividends in terms of future economic growth and investment capability to reinvest in the citizens of the region and the stakeholders of the region across all 10 plus countries that are in that trade deal, as well as the other countries that are represented today at the APEC meetings themselves.
Great thought over there. In fact, we've been talking to business leaders, and they have very similar answers of what you have just said, that take advantage of what we have and plan for the future. They say the secret of getting ahead is really to getting started, as you just mentioned, Bob. Let me move on to a question that you repeatedly emphasize on, that is the green development. But there's one thing we are facing, dampening effect of pandemic, economic recovery challenges, and also, of course, a lot of gaps within various economies and society. This will make the priority become difficult for businesses. So how to still make green a priority? Is there still much appetite for businesses, Bob?
It's interesting, Tian. A year ago, when we were together at this conference and doing it, when you looked at the World Economic Forum, the environment was a top 3 priority for just about every conversation.
Yes.
It was evident based upon the natural disasters that were happening around the world. It was evident in some of the activism that was happening from stakeholders, and you saw it with investors. Investors in ESG funds and others were very active in terms of getting to be more progressive in this area. Why? Because they did see sustainable and green financing as an opportunity for the future. And those that focused on it, those that focus on your ESGs, actually statistically, when you look at the academic research, have a more likelihood of success avoiding bankruptcy and remaining sustainable. So organizations clearly moved in this direction. Banks and insurance companies clearly started to ask these questions. And for any business, the CFO, the CEO, the investor relations persons typically were getting questions from their bankers, their analysts, their credit agencies, and others about this place. This is not a one or the other. COVID, economy, or green. It's an and statement. There is a tremendous power in the and. What I mean by that is you can actually solve for transforming organizations and do it in a more climate-friendly way that allows for you to achieve multiple objectives and create opportunities. And I think that's what many have seen with countries lately, where they are banking on the innovation that'll come to solve for these problems, creating job opportunity as a result of new companies and new jobs as a result, and making sure that they are seen as clean, climate-friendly, and satisfying the stakeholder needs that the consumers, the employees, or the investors, or the bankers want them to make. And I think that's a great opportunity. We see many examples from PwC. We, PwC, made our own commitment recently to be net zero by 2030. Why? Because our clients expect us to do the same. Our clients will expect us. Our employees will expect us to do the same. If not, they will not join us. If we don't do it, our clients won't use us. So there is a business reason that actually hits the bottom line, as well as being a good corporate citizen and taking care of society. This is an and statement, and there's tremendous power in doing both.
Not only businesses, but also economies in the Asia-Pacific region are committing. The country where I'm originally from, China, for example, have been committing to be net zero by the year 2050. And also we see Japan, for example, has also been making commitment, other economies as well. But there is the thing, Mr. Morris, how to make sure that the business world will be working with the national policies and be able to encourage one another. I think that would be a very interesting phenomenon to watch. What is your take?
Yeah, I think as we come back to this concept of reporting, I said the 5 R's, right? So repair, rethink, reconfigure, restart, and report. The reporting will do 2 things. It will demonstrate the progress we've made, and it'll demonstrate comparability, one country versus another, one business versus another, which will be the judge, and the stakeholders will be that judge. As a result, business and business leaders now are understanding the role is not just about how do I take care of my company. It's about how do I take care of my company and its stakeholders. So therefore, they will do what they can with their company. They will work with their stakeholders and their business partners and others in their ecosystem, and they will be more vocal in working with government leaders to talk about the public-private partnership that has to exist to deal with these challenges going forward. And the organizations that are doing that are more trusted. Trust is a commodity today that has weakened quite a bit over the last number of years. To be successful, to be sustainable, and to achieve your outcomes, you need to be more trusted. The employees, your stakeholders at large, will want you to do more with your voice.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. 2 follow-up questions from the audience that are writing to us about what's the role of multilateral organizations like APEC to help economies rebuild in a more inclusive way?
I think the organizations like APEC and many others are very important. I think they enable best practice sharing, they enable policy decisions across geographic borders, and they help reduce the friction that our systems have today. Second, they keep a focus on what the world needs. It's important to have those regular reminders, and it's important to make sure that we as leaders are being held accountable to drive the change that we want. So I continue to see, even though they are challenged in terms of how much impact they can have, a big opportunity for them to play a very important role. And the combination of public, private, and organizations like this, I think, are important three legs of the stool as we think about the future of the world that we're living in.
And last question, what about the prospect of China-U.S. relations, the two largest economies in this region, Asia-Pacific region?
So I think there's great opportunity. Again, I would ask us to think about the positives. We actually have a lot more positives than negatives. I know it's still a challenge for businesses and governments to think about the competitive landscape that each of them are in and the role that we can play in the world around economy, security, and values. But at the end of the day, we need to build on the success. The last few decades has demonstrated this world is a lot more connected and interdependent than disconnected and fragmented, similar to what's happened with the nationalism and protectionism. And the quicker we realize that humanity needs help, and the quicker we recognize that the system that we all have worked so hard at and benefited from needs to change and evolve and bring us to a better place. That's not limited to the geographic borders. That is applicable across the world, and there's many country worlds that need the U.S. and China to help with that. So the quicker we can get to at least more common ground and to launch from, I think the better we'll all be. And I do see great opportunity in that as we think about the next few years yet to come.
No matter where the leaders are coming from or which field, whether business or political leaders, one thing is so important, the sense of responsibility. Thank you so much, Bob Moritz, Global Chairman of PricewaterhouseCoopers, for sharing your insight. That's my conversation with Robert Moritz, the Global Chairman of PwC. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight, that's the name of our program, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of my team here in Beijing, thanks for watching.